The Crypto Markets Update is brought to you by KuCoin, the best place to find the next crypto gem.
Crypto markets taking their cue from the equities markets. And here to discuss more is Andre Portillo. He's head of digital assets at Brazilian asset manager BTG Pactual. Good morning, Andre.
Good morning, guys. How are you doing?
Good to hear from you. Good to see you. Of course, we're seeing Bitcoin and other crypto up today, and it's in light of some positive movements in the equities markets, particularly in Asia. Are we seeing Bitcoin specifically act more, as I said earlier in the show, as a proxy for the global health, for global economic health, when it used to be a hedge against potential downturns in the global economy? Has it changed its role?
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing exactly like this. Okay, especially this year, all the markets, I mean, crypto and traditional markets are moving, with a much higher correlation than we used to see, and I think that's everything related to what we're seeing in inflation and Fed. So now it's affecting all let's say the asset class, right? And I do think not only if you take the case of Bitcoin, but all other crypto that can maybe connect more with technology are behaving on the same way, right? On the other hand, specifically on Bitcoin, the market looks like it's struggling a little bit to maintain its price below 30K. Okay, I think last year we touched a little bit low, but market's correcting very fast to the upside after market stabilized. Okay, so I think there's two things that I'm watching, and the big question is like the higher interest rates that we are seeing right now. That's the big theme of the market right now. Okay, when the Fed needs to move, it will affect all asset classes in a sense, but it should affect much more, let's say, a cash flow generating asset classes. So if you take everything related to equity, bonds, real estate, that should be affected by a higher interest rates environment. If you look to blockchain and Bitcoin, they're not really affected by cash flows. They don't generate cash flows. So the question is, will this correlation break sometime in the future? I think that's the question that I'm trying to answer, and that's the point that the thing that I'm watching most here. Will the market somehow down the road start asking this question? And okay, depending on what happens with the dollar and with the traditional markets, can Bitcoin, actually become, like I say, a more safer haven that like it's behaving? I think that's the question that I'm looking for, right?
So, potentially one reason we're seeing this, of course, is that as institutions adopt crypto and Bitcoin specifically, that they will change and they'll allocate their portfolio according to situations happening in the overall market, and that if they're speculating in the technology of Bitcoin, it's acting as if it's a tech stock. At least that's been some of the argument. But stepping back now, we have this in mind. What are we seeing? What are you seeing? You mentioned this sort of bounce off from these 29,000s or so. You expect it to go higher, correct? And if so, who's doing the buying? Is it institutional in this case, again, as they allocated according to their portfolio, or is it more retail? What's your sense of what's happening right now?
I think on these current moves, it's too early to tell. Okay, this 30K point that I made is just something that, well, the market's telling me that, okay, unless there's something more strong, more strong in terms of the Fed and the markets, the market's struggling to be below 30K, okay? On the other hand, if you look to specifically more about Bitcoin, you have all the demand, right? Like you mentioned, institutional adoption, retail, and of course, when you have institutional adoption and the asset class goes mainstream, which say it's not more like just a niche asset where just crypto people uses, it sorts well. It makes sense to be more correlated with other asset class, right? But if you take that 30K, one thing that we need to observe is that, well, we have all the, let's say, the demand side, which means new adoption, new people coming into the markets. If you look to, well, the non-zero balances addresses in Bitcoin Ether, it goes steadily up, okay, every week. But on the other hand, you have the supply side of it as well, okay? And what we see in Bitcoin is that, well, supply is getting smaller and smaller. So although last week we have we've seen a lot of new coins coming back to exchanges, right? If you look, let's say, since the March 2020 when the lockdown started, it's a steady move down of coins getting out of the exchange. So what that tells me is that, well, there are new people coming into the market and people who are maybe buying this to hold for a longer period of time. Okay, again, this is data. We need to just watch the data as the market moves. But that's what I'm trying to take from the data right now. Okay, my sense right now is that we still have a lot of things to understand on the Fed behavior. Okay, I think the Fed, we might be in a situation that the Fed will need to be more aggressive than it is today, right? With the inflation that we are foreseeing right now, and the Fed talking about neutrality. I think there's some higher risk that they need to be more strong in their acting, and that for sure will continue to affect crypto. But until we have this thing more clearly, what I think that we might have, more calmer markets, at least in the next few weeks. Okay.
I just wanted to turn the focus to Latin America, which I believe is a region that you know well, and we don't always hear a lot about it in the US, but it's a really, really important player in the cryptocurrency market. I mean, we have some really major markets like Brazil and Argentina. And so I'm just curious if there's anything notable that's happening in the region in terms of the response to this market crash, or is it just kind of like a similar narrative to here in the US? Because it seems like there are some different use cases in Latin America.
Yeah, what I think that's a very interesting point, because if you take Latin America and you look at crypto, and as it is a very, let's say, flexible technology, we're seeing very different use cases when you look to different countries in Latin America. Okay, so for instance, you look to Mexico, people use a lot for remittance. I mean, a lot of Mexican people live in the US sending money to Mexico using crypto in a much more efficient and cheaper way that you'll be using the traditional rails, right? But if you go, let's say, to Argentina or Venezuela, people uses Bitcoin much more to escape the, let's say, the sovereign currency that, well, in process of hyperinflations and a lack of confidence. If you watch in Brazil, it's much more similar to the US when people use for, let's say, investments and speculation. So I think it's a very interesting point how people use this in a different way. I've been talking to a lot of clients here at BTG, not only retail clients, but also institutional clients in the last, I would say, 1 year. Okay, and the demand for having crypto conversations increased a lot since, let's say, last half of last year. And the interesting thing is that, well, after we have this correction this year and now way more, the conversations that I'm having, they didn't went down, on the opposite. So people are demanding, okay, I don't have any exposure to crypto. Now that market fell like more than 50%, is the right time to have some exposure? Or the people have a deeper understanding, wanting to discuss the thesis. Okay, what do you think about gaming? What do you think about DeFi? How long do you think this thing will go to the market? So it's a very different behavior if you look, let's say, to 1-2 years ago. And I think that tells me something about like institutional adoption, like the technology going mainstream. I think that's the case that we need to be paying attention right now.
Well, it's interesting you say that because as we speak, there are 44 countries that are meeting in El Salvador right now to discuss Bitcoin cryptocurrencies. And they're all from emerging markets, developing countries, central banks, and notably the United States and much of the West is exempt from this meeting. So, I just wonder, what are your thoughts on the significance of this? And, is crypto good for countries that despite its volatility?
I see this in a very pragmatic way because I think this is a process, okay? And if you take, for instance, U.S. or even Brazil have a very sophisticated financial industry. And for instance, in Brazil, we don't need crypto or Bitcoin for payments. We have a very sophisticated instantaneous payment system in Brazil, okay? Probably have the same in the U.S. So for us, that's not a use case. But if we look more broadly, there are several countries that they don't have this kind of infrastructure. So the question is, can crypto be the technology, the infrastructure to increase the pace of these countries being able to have a functioning payment system? My answer for this right now, it's yes. Maybe the technology is not there yet, but I think this approach, okay, so the technology will be capable of solving most of these problems probably in the future. If we take a look back in other technologies, a lot of things that are happening in crypto right now, they're not exclusive to crypto. They happen in several other different technologies in the past. It happened to the car, it happened to even the internet, okay? So I think it's definitely worth the discussion, and we that live in countries that have a functioning financial system, we should not look just to our use cases. We should look more broadly and understand, well, not every country has the same capabilities that we have, right?